two, and
Hey everybody, welcome to the Bridge the Gap DFS podcast. Got a great guest today for you guys. We have a little bit of a crossover. I know there's a lot of interest from people that play DFS to playing other games of risk, whether that be poker or sports betting. So we did a little bit of poker talk last week, mixed that with DFS, and tonight we're going to be jumping into the sports betting world. We have one of my buddies, Robert Schnitz. He just launched a podcast exclusively about sports betting, and I just listened to the first episode. It came out last week. It's on all the platforms. It's called Bagels and Locks, and join me in welcoming Rob to the program. Rob, how's it going, buddy?
What's up? I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Dude, I'm so excited about this podcast that you launched. We have a mutual friend named Cole, and Cole and I talk pretty much every day, and he was like, dude, you gotta hear this idea that my friend's putting together for a podcast. And I was like, and he kind of mentioned it casually, like in passing. I'm like, dude, like you got to put me in touch with this guy right away. Cause if what you described to me is what he's really going to execute on, I think it's a phenomenal idea. So why don't you tell us about yourself, and then we'll get into the subject of your podcast, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, dude. So I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. Go Bucks. Big Bengals fan, big sports fan. I'm full-blown degenerate. I've been sports betting pretty much since I was a freshman in college, but I will gamble on pretty much anything. I was playing NFL Blitz today at work for $100 per game. So anything to get the juices flowing, I'm in on. And I actually live in Arizona, so it sucks because here we can't do DFS. So hopefully we will be able to soon.
Well,
and my podcast started with a title, and then I sold it to so many people that I had to go through with it at the end of the day.
Well, and the title is what caught my attention more than anything. So why don't you talk us about the title, how you came up with it, and then how you applied that to sports betting?
So it is a play on words, obviously. So I am Jewish. And a nice Jewish delicatessen is bagels and locks, smoked salmon, LOX. But I started the podcast, Bagels and Locks, LOCKS, because everyone knows that, a lock is a sure thing. So it just started like that, and then I figured, well, I got to differentiate myself from – there's a lot of betting podcasts out there. I mean, it's pretty saturated. But the difference of Bagels and Locks is a bagel – it looks like a zero. So I talk about what I would stay away from, what not to bet on. And then the lock, of course, is, what I would bet on and whatnot. And so that's kind of the premise of the show.
And the thing that I like about it is it's entertaining, but it's also educational. And, you seem to be very self-deprecating in your approach, but very serious in your analysis. And I think that, you'll have some shows that, they're very serious with no personality. And then you have the other shows that have a ton of personality and not a lot of substance. So I think what you're really setting out to do, I think there's a big time market for it, especially for somebody that's new to sports betting, but also for somebody that has been a pretty big interest in sports betting like I have for, I ever since I knew what a handicap was in the betting line, going back to, I don't know, first, second, third grade, whenever I could read. So I think it appeals to both sides of the audience. And I'm very, very excited about it. The first episode was awesome. But before we get into that, talk to us a little bit about how'd you get into sports betting, and then when did you start betting?
So I probably started betting. I'm a big poker player. So I pretty much ran a casino in my basement growing up at home in middle school and high school, poker games and whatnot. But I didn't really start betting on sports until I got to college here at ASU. Go Devils. But yeah, probably sometime in college, and then it makes every game so much better. I mean, you could have a bag of chips on the game, and it's just so much better than watching it for nothing. So it's hard for me to watch a game without having some sort of action on it. So, but seriously, sports betting sometime in college, but I was pretty loose in the beginning. And now I've gotten more serious about it because I'm not here to lose my ass at
Sure.
the end of the day.
And that's one of the things too that everybody has an opinion when it comes to sports, and I think that sports betting, whether that's with an online sports book or in Vegas or with a friend or with a local bookie, that's your opportunity to back it up. Your opinion doesn't mean anything unless you're willing to put something on the line with it. And I think that's what we love about DFS, and I think that's the thing with sports betting. We're a week outside of the kickoff of the NFL season, and my interest goes from mild to very interested the moment, like you
Oh
said,
yeah.
something as small as a bag of chips is on. I'm in. So what helps you to start getting more serious? Because you would mention, hey, I started out casually, it's fun, but then you got to put in the work to get better at it. So when did things start to transition from just being casually into it to, hey, I'm going to take this serious?
In the last couple of years, because I used to force bets. It's like I just want to have action on the game. Um, but then I've realized that there's no point in having action on it because then you're just like flipping a coin. But if you can actually find yourself an edge or some sort of trend and have a real reason to bet on it. So in the last couple of years, I got more serious about it and started doing more research and whatnot. Before, as just a college kid, I was blowing all my money betting on games just to have action. So, I realized that it's not smart just to bet on every single game. It's better to be selective and actually have a reason to bet on something rather than really blowing the load.
So I'm glad you brought that up because that is one of the things that I wanted to touch on, because in your podcast you touched on 4 different games, and one of my takeaways was most of the podcast you were talking about why you shouldn't bet 2 of the games. So can you talk to us a little bit more about why being selective is important? Because it can be fun if you're going to put $5 on every single game, but that's not a way to make good money long term. So talk to us a little bit more about being selective and not forcing the action.
Yeah, so obviously it is gambling, but it's kind of like poker. If you ask me about poker, like I don't consider it gambling; it's more strategic. And it kind of goes the same for sports betting. If I have just a little bit of an edge, I feel pretty confident about it. So I try to go. I'm more of a trend better than anything else. Like if there's some sort of odd that's in my way that I feel like gives me some sort of advantage, I go with it. But on the games that I talk about to not bet on, it's just we don't have any idea about teams with new coaches, new systems. It's especially this time of year, it's very speculative. So I feel like episode 1 was the hardest episode to do because I haven't seen anything besides the preseason. So it's hard for me to back a team that has like a new head coach, for
Sure.
example,
Right.
even though I am backing one. But you don't know the identity of so many teams. So like if I don't know the identity and if I haven't seen anything, then you're really just flipping a coin and kind of shooting off the hip there. So.
So walk us through your process. How do you start getting a feel for a week, for a game, and then what rises to the top in terms of you start noticing more. Hey, your gut says I like this. You start backing it up with trends. So just kind of walk us through like a typical week of the lines come out, and then what do you do?
So first I go with the trends, and my favorite thing to bet on after week 1 is Thursday night home teams. So that's like first trend right off the bat, Thursday night NFL. I'll take the home team, whatever the spread is, just because when you think about what the away team has to go through, it's a short week. So Thursday night home teams, that's one of my favorite trends in the world. If the Patriots lose, I'm taking the Patriots the following week. There's some trends that if you look at some of these like against the spread records or whatnot, they're pretty eye-opening. So the first thing I do is I just scan through and I just see anything that catches my eye. And then I just keep an eye on the movement. So a half a point or a point in any direction can make a big difference, especially if like the line is like 2.5 or 3. And I'm all about buying hooks. If it's 3.5, bet your ass I'm buying it down to 3. If it's 7.5, I'm going for the hook at 7. So I've lost too many times on the hooks, so I'm all about buying a hook down or buying a hook up.
And by the hook, that's when we're talking about 7.5. The hook is always the half point. So when you're on those key numbers, it's very instrumental between, if you're looking at grinding out a profit about 55% on the season, that one or two bets where you're on the number or you lose because you didn't get off that key football number. I mean, that can be so huge over the course of a season.
And that's one thing that's took me a long time to learn is it worth throwing a little extra juice to get this half point? It absolutely is. Almost, if you're going to do it consistently, it will pay off in the end, because the difference of 7 points in a game to 7.5 in a game, it just makes such a big difference.
And I agree with that. And it's there's sometimes the spreads, are way off, and then other times, you'll have it almost identically land right on the number, and it is that half point that gets you the win versus the loss, and vice versa, to the point where, a lot of people think it's rigged, or how did Vegas know? And it's just like, what, they're just crunching numbers, and
Vegas is good.
They're
Vegas
very
is
good. They're very good, and they're trying to split the betting market. So, talk to us a little bit more about spotting some of those inefficiencies. I know that on your podcast you had mentioned avoiding trap games. Talk to us a little bit more about what a trap game is and how we could take advantage of getting on the other side once we recognize that.
When you scan through it, and the one that usually catches your eye the most is usually the trap game at the end of the day. And then the other thing I like to do is look and see what the public is betting on, because it's pretty easy to see where most of the money is. And the public really moves lines. So, I mean, if you see like, for example, I actually have this pulled up on my computer. So
Perfect.
If the public is 78% on Baltimore week 1 against the Dolphins, because if you listen to the podcast, I did rank the Dolphins as the worst team in the league. Okay, so the public is pounding Baltimore right now at minus. It started at 3.5, and now the public has moved it to 5. So the public has moved that 1.5 points. So if I at 3.5, okay, I kind of like Baltimore, but now at 5, that's 1.5 points. That's a very, very big difference in a game and in any sport. So now I'm like, okay, well, I would rather take Miami as a home dog at +5. So anything that really catches my eye, or any big line movement, because the public sometimes just pounds lines so hard that it'll move it a point or two, and then a point or two just gives you the edge. So fading the public is really not a bad system either if it's very heavily bet by the public. So that's also another thing that I look at. I have it pulled up on my computer just coincidentally.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because we hear a lot of the times, the pros bet numbers, the Joes bet teams. So you just said, hey, at this number, I like the Ravens. At this number, I like the Dolphins. But the average Joe is just betting the team. He doesn't care. If that line goes all the way to 7, he's going to think, well, it was 3, now it's 7. I better get in before it's 10. So I don't think
who cares?
Yeah,
I'm taking it.
And you had mentioned another game on your podcast that had a 5-point spread also, and you had mentioned, hey, 5 points in the NFL is quite a bit of points. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that? Because we don't think of 5 that often. We think of 3 and we think of 7, sometimes 6, sometimes 4, but not 5 that often. So can you talk to us a little bit more about, why that's a number that you're looking to buy at 5 versus laying the 5?
Because 5, when you think about it, especially as a dog, when you're getting 5 points, if they get any other points, say they have a field goal, I mean, you're essentially up 2 scores. I know technically you're up 1 score. They could go for 2, but they're not going for 2 to cover a spread. So at 5 points with a field goal or touchdown, what have you, all of a sudden any score puts you up 2 scores, and 2 scores, especially in the NFL. I mean, these are the best. These are the 32 best football teams in the entire world. They're all pretty damn good. This is not Florida Atlantic versus Ohio State here on Saturday, what I'm going to. It's the NFL. So if you can, 5 points it's just a large spread. If you go through all the lines, you're not going to see many NFL spreads over 4, or 4.5. And if you do, I mean, I'm inclined to take the team that's getting the points there.
And you just touched on something else that's very interesting to me. When I first started betting on sports, I was all about I didn't meet a favorite I didn't like. And now, 10, 15 years later, I'm almost never wanting to bet a favorite. I don't want to say never, but I'm going to try to find the
I
dogs
hate giving
first.
up points.
Yeah, I don't like it either. So talk to us a little bit more about how you transition from, as a beginning sports bettor to, hey, Ohio State's going to blow out Florida Atlantic this weekend, where the value
They
might
should win
be
by
on.
hopefully more than 27.5.
So when did you start
And I
loving the
do like,
dogs like you do now?
and I do like the over. I'm sorry, what'd you say in that? What'd you say?
Well, you got a Lane Kiffin offense and an offense in Ohio State that can put points on the board regardless of the coach or the quarterback is. So I'm with you there. But basically, what I said is, when did you start loving the dogs like you do now?
Um, it took me a while, honestly. Unfortunately, trial and error. you know, there's a lot of close games in the NFL. You don't see that many blowouts. So especially like one thing that I always look at too, another first thing, I always look at the home dogs. I love home dogs. So I mean, if you're home and getting points, you already have some sort of an edge there. And I know they bake in home field advantages and whatnot, but I mean, a home team in the NFL getting points, that's one thing that always catches my eye. But I hate giving up, like I'm just looking at these lines here. I hate giving up a lot of points in the NFL when it's both teams are technically very good.
Well, and they say, any given Sunday, they say that for a reason. And you're
Yeah,
right. If these are
they
the
play the
best,
game for a reason.
and it's funny because, you have a guy like Brock Osweiler who, an Arizona State guy, and he took a lot of crap when he was in the league, but it's like, he's still in the top 1% of 1% of 1% of quarterbacks in the world.
Absolutely.
Like, let's not get it twisted,
Absolutely.
And he actually, was that game in New England where they went in and beat the Patriots with Brock Osweiler? Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think they were like 7-point dogs a couple years ago. So yeah, I think that's great. And another thing that caught my eye about your podcast that I wanted you to touch on is you had mentioned another team that is getting a lot of hype this offseason. It's a rival of your favorite team. And you said, hey, everybody is thinking this. Nobody's talking about that. How do you take advantage not only of the public perception of line movement, but take advantage of public perception of, hey, this team is getting all the headlines, but on paper, I think we have a much closer matchup here.
Yeah, and that is what I feel like serious advantage too, is the media hypes up teams so much that I think it actually really does get to the odds makers, and that's something to take advantage of at the end of the day. Like the team we're talking about is the Cleveland Browns. I hate the Cleveland Browns, and they are so hyped up. Baker Mayfield came in when the season didn't matter last year, and obviously played well. I watched some of their last preseason game. They look like dog shit. The dog pound looked like dog shit. So until you show me something that matters, the media can say whatever they want. They have a lot of good players. Do they have a good team? You got to prove it to me first. I'll take it. I will fade them until it says otherwise. They literally have not proven anything at this point. So that line with the Tennessee Titans at +5, I might upgrade it to my lock. So,
Well, when I heard that on the podcast, you definitely got me thinking. And what you just said right there is almost exactly my approach in DFS is, with baseball season right now, and the big thing with baseball DFS is you want to be on a team that's going to score a lot of runs and have a bunch of hitters from that lineup. And sometimes I'll see a pitcher, and it's like people will be talking about Trevor Williams like he's Max Scherzer or Justin Verlander, and I take the same stance, like, all right, prove it to me. Like, if you're as good as you're being made out to be today, let's go, And so I think that's an incredible way to approach it, because if you're talking about, a scenario that we just mentioned with a 5-point spread, public perception, Vegas building in to take advantage of where the money's going. Hey, if they're getting pounded on the Browns, they need to offset that with trying to get some more money on the other side. And you talked about this in your podcast. You have Vrabel, who's from the school of Belichick and might be the first coach out of that school to actually be a good coach. He's been revamping that defense for 3 years now?
Yeah.
Mariota was the number 2 overall pick a couple years. I think there's a lot of things that people forget because all they see is Odell Beckham, Nick Chubb, Baker Mayfield. And oh, by the way, you mentioned this also. Who the hell is Freddie Kitchens? What do we know about this guy?
And has Baker Mayfield ever completed a pass to Odell Beckham? Who knows if those two even have chemistry?
You're right. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. No, that's a great point. So I think that
I have no idea.
I really like where your head's at because it's not just like, it's one thing to just look at the trends. Like, hey, this team on Sunday afternoon games is 4-0 against the spread the last 10 years. It's like so many different things have changed. But when you're taking a look at, hey, these are trends that I look at in terms of team chemistry, new coaching, player personnel. Do we know that even Odell Beckham's going to be a good fit in this? Because on paper, Jarvis Landry, Njoku, all this stuff looks great, but it's like you said, what have they done to justify us not testing them out?
They've done literally nothing. Literally nothing. And they're still the Browns.
That's a good point.
So I am biased in that regard.
But that's okay. But I think that, I think that you would say, I'll bet against my own team if it means I can make a buck on them.
And I do. I try to have an unbiased approach, absolutely. I do hate the Browns. There's weeks on Sundays where I'm all in on the Browns too. But until they show me something, yes, that's a new team with a new coach. Especially now that the Titans have a real opportunity now this year with the Andrew Luck news. I almost had to do an emergency episode 2 of the podcast because I was touching on how Andrew Luck was the team to beat in that division.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because that is something that I wanted to touch on is, one of the, more popular bets that we're seeing are future bets. Hey, bet on the Titans to win the AFC South. You can bet on them to win the AFC Conference. You can bet on them to win the Super Bowl. What's your opinion on futures bets? Do you think there's good value in there, or does it just tie up your money too long? Would you rather wait until the playoffs, then start betting on some futures? What's your outlook on that?
Honestly, I think there's great value in futures bets, but when I'm making a futures bet, I'm making a futures bet with the notion that I'm going to hedge it down the road.
Perfect.
So if it's a good futures bet, then I will hedge it the first opportunity I get.
So talk to us about that. Talk to us about what you mean when you're hedging, what opportunities you're looking for, and how you go about locking in a profit.
So, for example, if we just talk about the AFC South, now, I haven't looked at the updated odds, but before it was the Colts, they're probably ranked to lose that division now, come in 4th place. But, for example, the Titans, probably the Texans are probably the first to win that division. So there's probably some decent value on the Titans to win that division. They could easily win that division, really. So if I take the Titans to win that division and they're off to a pretty good start and that bet starts to look pretty good, then you might have some value down the road on, say, the Texans, who knows, maybe they're 6-6. The last quarter of the season's about to start. So then to hedge my Titans bet, okay, I'll put something on the Texans to win that division as far as that example goes. So just something where you can almost guarantee yourself some positive winnings.
And I think that that's such an underrated route to go. I think as bettors, we want the glory, we want the long shot, we want the story to tell everybody, we want the sexy thing just locking in a simple profit isn't sexy. And I think that too often the temptation, especially, around, end of the year, some long shot will be in the Final Four or the college playoff and someone got them at 50-1 and they're not going to hedge and it makes all the headlines. And I'm just like,
It's the
dude,
dumbest thing in the
like
world.
I'm all about it was that big of a struggle to get it here. Like, let's not go home empty handed,
Yeah. We're not trying to get rich here. But at the end of the day, we want to end in the green.
And that's what I really appreciate about your approach is sometimes people want to do that 10-team parlay. They want all or nothing. And it's just like, you know what? Sometimes you just got to take what the week is giving you. In the NFL, a bad call here, a bad bounce there, and you might be looking at, an 0-3 week pretty quickly. And that might not be indicative at all of what you decided to do. It might have been the right process, wrong result. So talk to us a little bit about what do you do when it doesn't go well in your process or you get the wrong result? How are you evaluating your process, staying in the pocket so that you can fire the next week with the utmost confidence and not chase?
Honestly, that's the big thing there is to not chase. For me, I'll keep the same process, but I gotta go to I need to sleep. I need to go to sleep. If I'm having a very very bad day, the worst thing I could do is bet the Hawaii game, the 11 o'clock p.m. to try to win it all back. I need to go to sleep and start fresh on a new day. The new day starts. You're 0-0. Yesterday is over. You got to keep moving forward and not try to chase it all back. Because I've caught myself way too many times betting on Hawaii late night, and it just talk about a crapshoot.
And that can be that, and that's fine if betting on Hawaii was always on the card. It's the
exactly.
Dude, I'm 0-5 today, and Arizona's in town. Arizona's a Pac-12 school, and who's Hawaii? I don't even know what conference they're in. And you bet Arizona, and you get smoked, which we saw on Saturday.
It's all about self-control. At the end of the day, it's all about self-control. So I got to move on to the next day without looking that I'm down this much or up this much. You got to keep the same system moving forward, or else at the end, if not, you're going to chase yourself and lose your ass.
And I think that that's the biggest obstacle of, doing this casually to doing it in a more professional manner or more professional mindset is, win or lose, tomorrow's a new day. Today's over. It doesn't matter what we did today. It's on to tomorrow. And I love what you said about getting sleep, because so often, like, tilting and chasing, it's just as real in sports betting as it is in DFS. And I see it all the time. They'll be playing on the main slate, and then their pitcher will get rocked early, and then they're throwing money into the evening slate that they had no intention of playing. And it's just like,
yeah,
you're doing
you're
yourself
forcing
such
it.
a yeah.
You never want to force a bet. The worst thing you could do is force a bet, and you should never. I try to stick with like I usually only bet it for me like a half unit or a unit, which $50 or $100 like is how I look at that. But there's no sense in just I'm down $400 or $500. I'm not going to put $400 or $500 on the next game. I'm going to keep it at a half a unit or a unit. I'm not just going to try to double or nothing at the end of the day.
Well, I'm
which
really
a lot of gamblers won't do.
And I'm really glad that you brought that up, because you just touched on something that I want to get into. But before we do that, we have our first sponsored segment of the year. We got our first sponsor, and I don't know if you're looking for any design work, Rob, but we have a great designer. He's worked on a lot of the stuff for the site.
Let's go.
He's doing some work for our YouTube right now. So I know you've got a logo. If you're looking for, some, additional logos and things like that, stickers, posters, flyers, signage, business cards, the whole nine. My man, Chris Moreno Design, chrismorenodesign.com's first sponsor of the Bridge the Gap DFS podcast. Hit up Chris for logo design, business cards, flyers, posters, signage, social media graphics, DFS avatars, Twitch emotes, Slack emotes, everything in between. Mention this, Bridge the Gap, receive 10% off your first design. Hit him up in his contact form, chrismorenodesign.com. That's our boy Sequence. And let's get into our sponsored segment, Ask the Professional. So you had just mentioned your unit. So talk to us a little bit more about bankroll distribution. If you have a $100 bankroll, what should a unit be, and what should you limit your action to in a given week? And that comes from our boy Mavin Goose.
So, a $100 bankroll, I would think a unit would be about $10, 10%.
Okay.
Of your bankroll. But you just got to bet what you can afford. And at the end of the day, if I'm betting a full unit on something, it's what I like the most. And there's some things where I don't love that much, but I feel like I have some sort of an edge. So I'll bet half a unit, and that you just got to be consistent with that. And as long as you're consistent, in the end, it will pay off.
Now, one of the things that we talk about pretty often with DFS bankroll management is DFS money is not the same as bill money. So I would say that you would probably agree with that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So how would somebody, let's say you're starting off with $100 and you're betting $10. Most of the time, that's something that somebody could replenish pretty quickly. What if you've grown your bankroll to $1,000, $5,000? How do you go about your bet size at that point and adjusting your unit? Are you still betting with 10%? Are you dropping it down to something more conservative in the 1% to 3% range? What would your advice be for that?
As long as I'm up, so I mean, if I'm up a good amount, then I'll up it if I really like the game. But I still try to stay consistent because I don't want to just up it. I'm up a lot of money, so I'll just put 4 or 5 units on this. But unless I really, really like something, I honestly just keep with the consistency of the unit or the half unit.
Perfect. Now, one of our next questions comes from Tom. Tom has a multifaceted question. So, number one, what are your best sports to bet or favorite sports to bet?
So definitely football, and I like the NFL the best. Like by far, I'm a diehard NFL fan. I'm also a diehard college football fan. But I honestly think that my best sport to bet is college football. I think you can find actually better edges in college football.
That's interesting because one of his follow-up questions is what goes into assessing positive expected value bets. So I would assume, and please elaborate or tell me I'm wrong if this is the case, but with college football, the pros, there's 16 games a week or less, really tight lines, lots of focus, lots of attention, very efficient. College football, over the next couple of weeks, we might see up to 50 to 100 games, depending on how many Division two schools are playing Division I schools. So I would assume that there's less interest, softer lines. They're not spending, some guy making a line for SMU and Tulsa isn't spending the same amount of time making the line for the Patriots and the Steelers. Is that the case?
Yeah. Well, like for example, like first week 1 of college football, the first thing that I'm looking up is I want to know the true freshman quarterback.
Oh, perfect.
If they're true freshman quarterback, I mean, I'll take my chances on that. The first couple weeks. The last time they played was on Friday night. They have not been in a big college football stadium. They've been playing spring ball. They're playing against a scout team, but they have not played a real football game. So the first thing I'm looking for in college football, especially the first few weeks, is true freshmen. So I just think there's some value there.
That's interesting. That's something I never even thought about it. But yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Playing on Friday nights to Saturday night, and God forbid it's an ESPN or a big network game. That's completely different.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we saw it with Miami and Florida the other night. If Florida doesn't have 34 penalties, I think they're smashing the freshman quarterback.
That was a very, very sloppy game.
Very much so.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. Our next question also comes from Tom. What's the best type of bets, whether that's money line, spreads, totals, teasers, parlays? What in your opinion has more edge than the others?
So parlays are how the casinos are built. So they get the marble floors by parlays. It's very, very rare that I ever do a parlay, and if I ever do a parlay, it's usually 2 large money lines. So, like a minus 300 favorite and another minus 300 favorite that will pay around even money.
Gotcha.
So, that's pretty much the only parlay I'll ever do, because that's a good way to really lose your bankroll. But I like spreads mostly. If I ever bet a money line bet, it's typically that they're -3, -2, small favorites.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give, I'd rather give, not lay the few points, and I'll lay the extra juice to basically just have a pick 'em game.
Well, it almost always feels like in those games, let's say it's like the line's at like -2 and it's just pretty much like a deadline and you can lay it at -150. It's almost always the game where like the favorite misses the extra point and you're like, all of a sudden the spread.
And you feel really silly for taking it at -2 at that point when you could have basically laid, $20, $30 more of juice and then you got a winner. And that's a big shift as far as your units go. I mean, if you're laying a unit, it's a 2-unit swing.
And that's huge. And it's those little edges, with DFS, like at the end of the day, I just want to take a profit. Sometimes it's small, sometimes it's large. And if it's a losing day, I just want to try to have it a small losing day and not lose my ass. So those small things, those small edges, they add up very quickly, especially over the course of a season. If you're on the wrong side of those field goals and, the hooks and the missed extra points, that can be the difference between breaking even and having a monster season. I know it sounds so.
Absolutely.
It sounds so.
I joke about this, but it really is a grind.
Oh yeah, it absolutely is. Yeah, it is, and it's almost like, whenever you're on, and I tell this people sometimes in DFS, and I think there's a lot of carryover in sports betting is, like the games where it's a favorite and they're trying to run out the clock, or the other team is throwing the ball, trying to get the lateral last-ditch effort, and then somebody...
The razzle-dazzle?
Yeah, they try to do the razzle-dazzle, and they fumble, and then all of a sudden it goes from, the dog was covering to now the favorite covered, and it's like... You got to appreciate it when you're on the right side of something lucky like that, and then, try to...
That's a bad beat. I mean, if you watch the Bad Beat segment on Scott Van Pelt, I mean, they showed the Ohio State Northwestern game, and Brent Musburger, like, that was important to some, but not important to others.
and that's the thing, man. It's like, if you can just, like, be more on the better side of more bad beats at the end of the year, like, and just do all the little things right, it's just amazing. Like, you could finish, 10 games better just by doing all the little stuff that you're talking about.
Yeah.
So we have one other follow-up question, and you talked about it a little bit with like the reverse line movement or line movement in general. So how do you decipher, the public moving something from, someone making a big bet on that, and when you see the line movement like that, what does that mean to you?
So, I mean, it depends how big the movement is, I mean, it honestly just depends how big the movement is. If it's just a half a point and you're going from, like 8 to 8.5, what is there that much value there? But is it half a point going from 7 to 7.5? Okay, well, now I got more than a touchdown. So it kind of just depends on the movement and the situation, to be honest with you on that one.
One of the other things that you talked about on your podcast, so that's going to wrap up our audience question segment. Thank you again to Chris
Thanks,
Moreno.
audience.
Yeah, Chris Moreno, designs.com. Really appreciate it. And we'll be doing that every podcast moving forward. So I have a couple other questions. So why start a betting podcast now? And thanks for the shout out on your podcast, by the way. I appreciate that.
Oh, yeah, of course. And we're here to support each other.
Amen.
Besides the fact that I pitched this podcast to so many people that I felt like I almost had to go through with it, it's just fun. Like, I always wanted to be on the radio, honestly. Like, I am a diehard Dan Patrick fan.
Awesome.
At first, I always wanted to be a Danette. Now I figure, like, all right, well, I don't want to be a Danette anymore. I'll just be Dan. So, I love Dan Patrick. I love Colin Cowherd. I love Howard Stern too, unrelated to sports. So, like, I've always had like a passion for radio and listening to the radio. And I just feel like it's a fun hobby. During the day I'm selling mortgages. This is way more fun than selling mortgages.
Well, that's awesome, man. I think it's going to be great, man. Especially like we were chatting before, and you're just like, man, like, if I can just start out hot, and I was like, dude, even if you don't, like, even if you suck, like, and you're entertaining, like, at least you can tell us who to bet on and we can take the other side,
Yeah, you can fade me. You know what? If I'm losing and you want to fade me, I would do the same thing if I were you, I can't blame anyone for that. And that's the thing. It's like, it's supposed to be fun. It's lighthearted. I say in my podcast, yeah, I'm not going to apologize for any losers. You do get what you pay for. But yeah, I mean, it's just like it's a fun thing that I wanted to do, and I'm glad I followed through with it. And I'm excited to see where it goes.
And the intention is to give the picks away for free on the podcast, and then you'll be posting them on Twitter as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I gotta pick up my Twitter game. That's one of my goals too. It's hard to get up on the social media.
Yeah, I don't do Facebook. I don't do Instagram. I'm the same way. The only reason I'm on Twitter is to just kind of connect with the audience and to stay up on the sports news. Yeah, so I'm right there with you. And I think that's important because, transparency is, even if, it's not going well, I think people want to see that. And then when it is going well and people are celebrating you, it's because they've seen the transparency that you're going for, which is not
absolutely. It's important.
There's
really
very,
important.
very little at all transparency in the betting world, and it's tout this and tout that and give me $50 for, my Bears and Packers pick, and then half of the audience gets the Bears, the other half gets the Packers, and it's so gross and it's so shady. And to have somebody that's entertaining like you are, but knows what they're talking about and is going to be transparent, I mean, that's a deadly combination, man. That's why I think this is going to be so successful for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So how often will you be podcasting?
So my plan right now is once a week.
Okay.
Weekly. I'm thinking every Wednesday. I was just like really excited to post the first episode. So I think I posted it on Sunday. But my plan is every Wednesday because it's before, it's before the Thursday night game. It's before the football weekend. I can talk about the Monday night game. My plan moving forward is every Wednesday, 20 to 30 minutes. I'll give my spiel, I'll give my bagels, I'll give my locks, and we'll see how the season goes. And I'll keep track of. I'll have a lock record and whatnot, and I'm not going to guarantee a winning record, but I feel very good, about the end of the year.
Well, and I love what you said on the podcast. It's like, I'm not going to apologize to this because you get what you pay for and it's free. So
yeah, absolutely. If you want to pay for picks, call Vegas Dave.
Yeah, call Vegas.
I'm Scottsdale Rob.
Dude, that would be amazing. Like if on your podcast you had like a fake commercial, 888-222 Scottsdale Rob. Just call me today for your Super Bowl winner.
We'll get there.
Dude, that's amazing. So talk to us about how you mentioned you've got a full-time job. You're married. How do you balance family life and work life?
Honestly, it's pretty easy for me because I need an escape. I work a lot of hours at my job, but I've also been doing this for a long time. So it's so nice to come home on the weekend or at night and just like do something for me at the end of the day.
Totally.
And my wife knows what she signed up for. So she knows that I'm a full-blown degenerate, and she will literally sit and play on her phone or play on her computer or tablet literally the entire weekend while I am like a madman in front of the TV watching football games. I have my fantasy on my phone. I have the one game on my iPad, and then I have the other game on my big screen, and I'm just like overstimulated from Saturday until the end of Sunday Night Football. But that's what I love.
And I totally agree with that. And it's funny too, because like I would date girls in the past and I would be like, okay, like here's the deal. Like we're going to have fun on Friday and Saturday. Sunday, like I'm watching football all day with my friends. Just like it's a non-negotiable. And they're like, oh my gosh, like that sounds so cool. And then like the first week goes by and then the second week. And by like week 3, they're like, so are we going to do anything can we go to brunch today? I'm like, what part of like non-negotiable did you understand? Like, they're like, so this is every Sunday? I'm like, yes, this is every Sunday. Like, but then it's like, there are 365 days in the year and I'm only asking for 22 out of these, 22 out of 365. Like I'll go, let's go to dinner with your parents. Anyways, but like my wife was one of the first people that I dated that I made this very clear, and she's been
Oh yeah.
totally respectful of it, and she understands. And it's like, we don't have any like these crazy vices. It's like you said, like I work hard. This is my decompression. This is for me. This is how I stay centered. And
You gotta have an escape. I can't bang the phones all day.
dude, yeah, I'm the same way, and but it's fun too because it's not like our mortgage is on a game. It's a little bit amount of money to make it interesting. It's a healthy habit, and anything gambling related and DFS related, it can go from fun to addiction very quickly. So I think the things that you talked about of betting within your means, having fun, because it's like that's the thing is whether it goes poorly or not. At the end of the day, it's like I still have a pretty good life. I still have a great life.
I'm not losing any sleep over it. If I lose, I'll go to sleep. We'll start over the next day.
Perfect. Yeah, that's the way to do it. I always say if I lose sleep over the amount of money that I've been playing on DFS, it's too much. Like that's my barometer.
Yeah, then you have a problem.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I wanted to touch on another thing from your podcast that I thought was really, really cool is you said that you had some power rankings. So I wanted to just ask you a couple questions about that. How'd you come up with them? Are you going to be sharing the power rankings with the audience on the podcast, maybe posting the actual rankings week to week? And how are they important in your process for who you're liking week to week?
So they're definitely important in my process of who I like week to week. And they mostly come from, right now they're coming from last season's performance and off-season acquisitions and new coaching and whatnot. So it's kind of hard this is the hardest time of the year as far as, in my opinion, as far as sports betting goes, because there's so much speculation and whatnot. But I'll probably share more of the power rankings as we go, and they'll change week by week. But it's mostly just there's honestly not much goes into it besides just my feel and intuition as far as the teams and what I've seen on paper and the games that I've watched. But it's important for me as far as like where teams stack up against each other.
And I think that
it's come from essentially just my own intuition and just watching the games. And I mean, I watch every single game that's on.
and I think that this is where that Titans and Browns game comes into play, because your first intuition is one team's great, the other team sucks, and it's like, didn't one of these teams go into Kansas City and beat the Chiefs 2 years ago? And having something that, some kind of data behind that to separate, hey, I know what my eyes saw, I know what my intuition says. Oh, and the numbers back it up? This just went from, a like to a love to a lock kind of a thing.
Yeah. I mean, the Titans-Browns game, I mean, the media's hyped up the Browns so much. Honestly, I honestly think that spread would normally be around Browns -3. Like, I think that they are getting a couple extra points right now, just because of the media. And I mean, that's the most hyped team in the league. They haven't shown me literally anything. How am I gonna lay 5 points against a team that has actually produced and showed me they can win and be a competitor in their division? I mean, when's the last time the Browns won the AFC North? I don't know.
I think Derek Anderson was at 98.
I think I was in diapers.
I
might have not even been born. I don't think I was born.
So you would also mention on your podcast, teasers being in play. When does a teaser enter your radar, and how do you feel about them? Is it, I'm just going to bet straights or sides, or when does a teaser?
I really like teasers.
Okay.
2-game teasers, not more than 2 games. A 2-game teaser, you're depending on if you're going like 6.5. You're probably it's -120, -130, so you're getting pretty good odds, and you're getting 6 points or so. I look for teasers on 7-point home favorites.
Okay.
Something where basically you're getting a touchdown favorite, as you're basically getting in that as a 1-point favorite or a 0.5 point favorite. So, like, for example, like the Patriots at home, prime time, season opener, they're -6 right now. Them to win their first game at home, I'll take it. But there's also teams that I look for on teasers. Like if you look at, like, for example, like the Seahawks, and their record on games and like points that they've lost by, like that's just a team that if they lose a game, they're mostly close games. So if they're a dog and you're going to get 6 or 7 points, wow, I mean, now you're getting, a team that historically doesn't lose by that much, and you're getting you're getting another 6 or 7 points for them. So it's also more. I look for 7 points or 6 point favorites, but I also look for teams that don't normally get blown out, for like Seahawks, for example.
So that's really interesting, because that just got my gears spinning. Because, yeah, you're right. It's like, they're going to be prepared with Carroll. You're never out of a game with Russell Wilson. They are one of the few run first, play defense teams. So, yeah, that's because I could see how, hey, like, maybe they're a 4-point dog, going to like Kansas City or something, and then you tease that up to 10. It's like, when was the last time Russell Wilson lost by double digits?
Double digits, yeah.
That's good stuff, man. That's real good stuff. So we have football on Thursday, football on Friday, football on Saturday, football on Sunday, Monday, and then Maction starts in on Tuesdays. How are you?
Love the Maction. Also the Fun Belt. Don't forget about the Fun Belt Wednesdays.
I forgot about Fun Belt Wednesdays. So how are you keeping things in check in terms of not betting every single day, or are you just looking at, what's your volume like with everything that's in action this fall? Are you looking at 1 to 3 plays a day, 1 a day? What are you doing to stay disciplined while still maintaining your edge?
On a Sunday, I honestly try to limit it to 3 games, because I feel like I can pick 3 games and I can go 2 for 3. So like on a Sunday, 3 games, and then on a Saturday, I mean, there's such a big college football slate, but I try to go with the same thing. If I'm picking 3 games, all right, I'll try to go 2 for 3. Sometimes I like 4 games, I'll go 3 for 4. Like those are my goals. My goal is not to go 100%, because at the end of the day, it's not realistic. So I less than a handful of games per day, and I don't always bet the Maction and the Fun Belt unless I really like it. But I almost always bet the Thursday night home. I will go with the trend of Thursday night home teams in the NFL. So that's just like a given for me every Thursday night.
Now, I know some guys do not crossing NFL and college football teasers. Some people love it. What's your attitude about that?
No, I don't like it. NFL is with the NFL, college football, and it's like apples and oranges. So I want to keep them both together. I'm with those guys.
On the podcast, how much of your picks will be NFL related versus college football related?
That's a great question. It kind of just depends on what catches my eye that week. So the first episode I fully focus on the NFL, but there's times where I'm definitely going to have it mixed, and then it's probably going to be 50-50. I also am a big advocate of especially this time of year, during football season, my wife has to watch Saturday, Sunday of football. This time of year, we watch golf Saturday, Sunday from the Golf Channel. Their broadcast at 8 a.m. to their broadcast at 12, and then we watch the main broadcast from 12 to 3 on the primetime channel. So like this time of year, it's all golf. So I'm gonna talk about other things besides football too, because I dabble in a lot of other sports as well.
See, because that's awesome, because there's, the 4 major sports I understand fairly well, but to get into some of this other stuff you had mentioned, maybe tennis also. So to get into, try to find some edge elsewhere, or to have somebody that I could lean on, it's like, hey, who do you like this weekend for the Masters? Is there value on Koepka? Is there value on Tiger? Whatever. I would love to just have somebody that I know has done the homework that I could just piggyback off of and throw $20-$50 on something to root for on a sport that I don't really have much interest in. All of a sudden, the Masters is interesting to me.
Yeah. Call me crazy, but I think golf, I actually have I can find the biggest edges in. Like, I mean, that actually comes down to looking up the courses and then like the ball striking. I mean, there's lots of different things you can look at in golf, but I think there's some real edges you can find in golf.
See, now we're talking. That's what I like to hear, because that's one of the sports, like, if we're talking about what we were saying with, hey, there's 100 college football games, like how tight are these golf lines going to be, or these matchups going to be? It's like, what person like me is looking up the stuff that you just talked about? I'm not doing any of that stuff. I'm going to be betting the names that I've heard of versus the guy I haven't heard of. So you're looking at stuff that I think is a huge edge to exploit, and that gets me excited about curing my boredom outside of football season.
Dude, golf is where it's at, especially because you can pretty much, especially for a golf tournament, it's 4 days obviously, but you can kind of scope it out Thursday, Friday, and then you have a pretty good idea of how these guys are playing into the weekend. So there's golf is something that's not talked about a lot, but it's my second favorite sport to bet besides football.
Well, we're definitely going to have you come back on for golf. But before we let you go, I wanted to just touch on one other thing. On your podcast, you had mentioned, primetime games are when everybody wants to get action in, especially end of the week. On your podcast, you'd actually talked about 2 games that are end of week 1 NFL primetime that you don't really have much interest in. So talk to us a little bit more about not betting, the Saturday night game if there's no edge, not betting Monday night just because you can.
It's just a matter of forcing it. I mean, if you can't find an edge, then don't force it. If you want a little action on it, then you can put a little action on there. As long as you can afford it and you don't really care about it, just to have some action. But those games, if you can't really find an edge, and they're so speculative, especially like I was talking about the Raiders Broncos. Who knows about those teams so far? You have Hard Knocks you can look at at the Raiders, and then the Broncos. They got a new coach. They got a new quarterback. It's like, what am I supposed to do here? You got no idea. So it's just one of those things. If you're serious about sports betting, it's a game you're supposed to stay away from. But if you want to have some action on, you're just doing it for fun, then pick a team, But if you're serious about it, those are the stayaways. It's just one of those things.
And we call it lunch money bets. If you need to have something on it, just put a little lunch money on it. If you win, you can go to Chipotle tomorrow. If you lose, pack a lunch. Yeah,
pat yourself on the back if you pick a winner in that. But at the end of the day, this is a game that you're not supposed to be betting on. It's also, again, I know I've harped on this a little bit, but it's very hard this time of year because you haven't seen the product yet.
Sure. Well, and the lines makers have pretty much had all summer to work on these lines also, so they're not going to be as inefficient as they are in weeks to come.
Absolutely.
Well, Rob, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, man. I'm super excited about your podcast. I loved the first episode. It was everything I thought it could be and then some. So before we sign off here, just plug your podcast, your Twitter, just plug anything and everything we can find you and when to expect the next episode.
Yeah, so if you search for Bagels and Locks, you can find me on Twitter. You can also find me on pretty much every podcast platform. So Bagels and Locks, Locks, not the salmon, Lox. And basically all we talk about is the bagel is what not to bet on, the lock is what to bet on. So I'm going to touch on both, and we're going to have fun. It'll be funny. It's not too short. It's not too long. It's just one of those things. I'm going to give you my talking points, give you my analysis, give you my bets. And, the goal is to beat the books together. So that at the end of the day, that's what we're going to do. Dude,
I love it, man. I love it, from the content to the podcast art to the intro song is one of the best intro songs I've ever heard of any podcast. Like, I want to listen to it before and after, and not even I'll just go back and listen to it again because it's just really catchy. Bagels, Locks?
The Bagels and Locks jingle.
Dude, it's so good. It's so good. Well, thank you again, man. Thank you, everybody that caught us live on Twitch. This will get up on all the podcast platforms, be up on YouTube. Please support Rob. He's a great guy, got a great product, and I'm just thrilled to see where it's going to go. Follow him on Twitter. And I just appreciate you guys very much. We'll get some more NFL DFS content. There's a lot of great people doing NFL DFS content this week. Rob's going to get you set on some bets. And we're locked and loaded. We're a week out, and I couldn't be more excited about it. So thank you, Rob. Thank you, everybody.
Can't wait.
And yeah, man, we'll do this again real soon. Have you on during the year, check in, see how it's going, get us up to speed on golf. Anything else expertise-wise that you can offer in terms of Major League Baseball playoffs or hockey or basketball, I'd love to have you, buddy.
And I look forward to it. Thank you for having me tonight.
My pleasure. All right, guys, thanks for checking out the podcast. And thank you, Chris, for sponsoring the podcast, chrismorenodesign.com. Go see Chris for all your design
Chris, you're the
needs.
man.
Chris is the man. Hit him up, Bridge the Gap promo code, get 10% off your first order, and we'll see you guys the next time. God bless.